brief, startup. This is basically my take on The Hangover meets Regency England. But I have one girl with a few guys. So she doesn't remember what she did, but I'm not going to start with her because he's much more cynical and fun to be as mine. So, St. Austell House, Mayfair, April 1813. Jason York, the Earl of St. Austell, glanced at his empty coffee cup and frowned. Maintaining a decent staff was a bloody difficult thing to do these days. Partly, he could accuse the blame. Not entirely, but partly. At least if his sister was to be believed. If Jason's reputation wasn't quite so tarnished, respectable servants would willingly work for him, and he would currently have a cup of coffee this morning. That was his sister Nora's favorite eating event. From the corridor, someone screamed. His butler, if Jason wasn't mistaken, and the man sounded like a frightened schoolgirl. What the devil? And Jason pushed away from the breakfast table and headed toward the corridor. When the door burst open, an enraged gentleman stopped over the threshold and into the breakfast room. The Marquis of Berkswell. Jason frowned. He hadn't cuckolded the man, had he? No, he didn't think so. In fact, he didn't even think Berkswell was married. Looking for me, Jason drawled, as he assumed a carefree stance. Whatever madness had propelled Berkswell to his door, Jason wasn't about to let the dark eyes think him flustered. Berkswell's dark eyes flashed and he lunged for Jason, his hands outstretched like a bedlamite bent on murder. Jason sidestepped the man Marquess and pulled his arms across his chest. I can't imagine what has brought you to my door, but kindly remove yourself. Because God knew Jason could have depended on his staff to toss Berkswell out. The cowards had even poked their heads at the breakfast room to see what the commotion was about. Berkswell stumbled forward, but righted himself. You, he growled. Yes, me, Jason agreed. I'm not quite sure what has you in a rage, Berkswell. Why don't you return when you could string more than one syllable together? We'll discuss whatever it is like gentlemen. Gentlemen! The Marquess's nose flared like that of a pent-up bull. Then he leapt forward again and somehow managed to catch a handful of Jason's jacket in the process. Berkswell's fist connected with Jason's nose a half second later. A gentleman wouldn't get my sister's name in that book. I'll put your name on a gravestone. Do you mind? Jason tore himself out of the man's grasp and frowned when he noticed droplets of blood now stained his previously snowy cravat. Last and damp, even if he had another clean one. Oh, I mind, Berkswell growled. Jason moved a handkerchief to his nose and glared at his uninvited guest. Honestly, I have no idea what has you in such a state. So either tell me my offense or go destroy someone else's morning. My sister! Berkswell bellowed, which there was no reason to do. Jason could hear him just fine. That didn't make any sense. Is that supposed to mean something to me? You got her name in the betting book in whites. Jason was fairly certain he remembered doing something like that. He shook his head, carefully kept his handkerchief in place and his loss of blood to a minimum. I think you got the wrong cad. I don't even know your sister. At least you didn't think he did. He mentally went down the list of widows he'd recently entertained. Lady Tennant wasn't Berkswell's sister, was she? Lady Philippa Casemore, the Marquess ground out. I have on the highest authority you waltzed with her last night at the Heathfields. Philippa Casemore, the fox schoolgirl, the one costume that liberally supplied with brandy until she could barely stand in a lone waltz. Jason had been asked to stand up with him. She pulled him into the middle of the dance floor and insisted he called her Pippa, he said softly, which was the wrong thing to do with the growl emanating from Berkswell was any indication. Jason took a step backward and lifted up one hand to halt Berkswell mid-step. I only danced with her. You ruined her name with that bloody bet. Again, what is a bet? The man honestly made no more lessons the more he talked. I have no idea what you're going on about, and virtuous schoolgirls are hardly my sort. So if that's all you came to say, you can take your leave. Stay away from my sister. She's got no intention of going near the chit. You might want to visit Albert Poston on the way back home. The man gave her his flask sometime in the night. Got the girl so deep in her cups, I'd be surprised if she even remembers her own name this morning. Consider yourself warned. If you so much as approach my sister, I'll call you out and put a bullet in the middle of that miserable heart of yours. A few hours later, Berkswell! Viscount Heathfield chuckled as he and Jason entered the throng on Rotten Row. Mild-mannered Berkswell! Jason touched a hand to his nose and winced as he jiggled it back and forth. I think you might have broken it. He chuckled again. I'm certain you didn't deserve it in the least. Jason glared at his friend. You know very well I didn't. That shit was more than Fox and I didn't touch her. You lost with her, if one could call it that. And we felony at every turn. Yes, well, last night was the last time I attended some function being hosted at your house. You can bloody well depend on that. You're simply not accustomed to socializing with polite society, he replied. Even so, Emma was quite delighted to make your acquaintance last night. She wanted me to pass on her appreciation to you for making her ball the most talked about affair of the season. The season just began. And now everyone else will be trying to reach the bar Emma's ball set. My broken nose and I are pleased to have helped, Jason grumbled. Heath wasn't the same fellow he'd once been. Not since he'd taken a wife over Christmas. The last thing he would have discussed this time last year was which societal event was the talk of the season. Jason set a sidelong glance at his little friend. Do pass on my congratulations to Lady Heathfield. She seems to have reformed you rather well in a very short period of time. Heath only grinned, which proved Jason's point perfectly. And they say rakes can't be reformed. Heath laughed. No, I think they say you can't be reformed. Finally, Jason smiled in return. Touche, I do believe that is what they say. What's wrong with Clee's beanie wig? Why would you put that bet in the book? Jason smiled vanished. Damn drunkard. Someone must have overheard me last night and put him up to it. Overheard something about your ability to beg the lady in question? Jason heaved a sigh. Do you know how many times I have said something similar over the years? Roughly. I've never imagined a sequel print for all the world to discuss, however. Well, he gestured toward the other side of the lane with the cock of his head. There's your Lady Philippa now. Do watch yourself, but I said Harrison Casement left is far more fierce than Bergsville's. Jason's gaze shot across Rotten Road, landing on the chicken question. Debbie Casemore's light brown curls swayed gently in the breeze, her head tilted towards another girl in obvious deep discussion. She barely resembled the inebriated chip from the night before. Still pretty, of course, and the sun made her hair reflect a bit of gold, but she seemed more innocent in the light of day, more respectable. What a pity. I bet they're talking about you, he said, with he were lacing his words. Bet? Jason stopped in his tracks, folded his arms across his chest, and glared at his friend. You didn't have Cleve put that bet in the book, did you? He snorted. Me? Jason supposed not. A friend would never do such a thing to him. Somebody did, and whoever raised his got punched to the nose waiting for him. Tit for tat, eye for an eye. Jason touched his finger in his hand, or nose as the case may be. Ah, and the lady disappears, he said. Jason looked back to where Lady Philippa had been just a moment ago to find her dark-haired friend all alone on the path. Did you see where she went? Heath gestured to a clump of trees not far away. Planned assignation, perhaps? Perhaps, Jason agreed. But the idea of Pippa Casemore meeting some fellow in the trees brought a scowl to his face. Someone ought to warn the fellow off. Someone? He chuckled. Oh, bugger off, Jason grumbled. This is her not the direction of wind that leaves his coats. Pippa's heart pounded so loudly she could barely breathe. Those walking along Rotten Row must be able to hear it. How had she got herself in such a predicament? She had pressed herself against the tree and closed her eyes, willing her pulse and her breath to return to their normal paces after she bolted away from Lady Moore Kirkwood. What else could she have done? St. Austell was here? In the park? Blast it! She didn't know what the man looked like. How was she to avoid him? Waiting for someone, drawled a rich baritone voice. Pippa's eyes flew open. The most breathtakingly handsome man stood a few feet away. Hair so dark across his brow it blended perfectly with the night sky, which was contrasted with the softest, bluest eyes she'd ever seen. He looked almost like a fallen angel as he reached into his jacket for a chair root. Pippa managed to shake her head. Hiding. Hiding, he quirked at her. Emily did. She tingled all the way to her toes. There's someone here I shouldn't be seen with, she said, then frowned at her own foolishness. It was ridiculous to say that she's a stranger. She was clearly not herself these days. What would the man think of her? Indeed, and who are you hiding from, sweetheart? He popped the cherry to his mouth. I'll tell you if I spot him. Pippa winced. He glanced over at the fashionable people back on the path. It'd be easier to avoid St. Austell if she remembered what the man looked like. But perhaps his fellow could help out in that regard. Are you acquainted with Lord St. Austell? St. Austell? Lily's little flashed in stranger's eyes. As it happens, I am familiar with the man, yes. Thank you, heavens, she sighed. You're hiding from St. Austell? The man asked, a line appearing between his brows. At her nod, he continued. It hardly strikes me as the sort of trouble himself with fools fresh from the schoolroom. Tell me, has the blackguard been troubling you? Not really. Miss Pippa didn't think so. She could remember any of it. She shook her head. I just shouldn't be seen with him, that's all. My brother's been most unhappy with me. I think I hate to disappoint either Brooks or Harry. The two of them had raised her since she was 10, like fathers and brothers sometimes. If someone mentioned St. Austell to either of them, Pippa turned her attention back to Rotten Row. Do you see him anywhere? The stranger came up from behind Pippa and placed his hand on her shoulder. The heat from his body seeped through her walking dress and warmed her back. His voice rumbled over her like a caress. No, I don't see him at the moment. Are you sure he's out there? Pippa wasn't sure. Not of anything. Someone said he was, she muttered. People are often mistaken, the man replied. I wish I knew what he looked like so I know how to avoid him. Difficult avoiding a fellow who can't pick out of a crowd, the stranger chuckled. Should I have no home St. Austell? I'll warn him away from you if you'd like. Pippa spun around to face the stranger. Heavens, he was much too close and much too handsome. She took a step backward. I'm sure that won't be necessary, Mr. Colebrook, the man did his heavy greeting. Viscount Colebrook, at your service, Miss. Lady Philippa Casemore, Eva replied, and her breath caught in her throat as she gazed into Lord Colebrook's blue eyes. The lady could drown in those eyes, happily drowned, and never even know how it happened. Well, Lady Philippa, I hate to think that St. Austell causing you a black-hearted villain is. Are you certain you don't want me to dispense with the man? Be my honor. Eva shook her head. I'm certain my brothers will protect me should the need arise. Brothers do have a way of doing that. He touched a hand to his nose. If you're quite all right, I'll take my leave. Thank you, Lord Colebrook. It was kind of you to help me. My pleasure, he turned back, which made Eva's heart flooding with good. Perhaps I'll see more of you in days to come, sweetheart. What a lovely thought. Pick over about such occurrences from this day forward, she had no doubt. Perhaps, she returned coyly. And as quickly as it appeared, Lord Colebrook took his leave without a backward glance. Lord Colebrook. She had if any other man in all of London was as dangerously handsome. He had offered to be her own Sir Galahad where that despicable St. Austell was concerned. She couldn't help from sighing. Colebrook. Jason scowled at himself as he pushed past William's fashionable, not for a stroll in the park. He stopped at the fountain park playing entrance and looked back where he had come from. He was too far away now to spot the enchanting shift, but he could still see her in his mind's eye. Pretty light brown tendrils framing her face, perfectly kissable lips pursed in worry. Why the devil had he told her he was Colebrook? Colebrook, for God's sake. It wasn't a lie. Not really. He was Viscount Colebrook. Well, no one had called him that since he was 7, and his father had passed the earldom with the St. Austell name on to Jason. But that wasn't really the point. Though as he stood alone on the edge of Hyde Park, he wasn't quite certain what the point was. He had gotten his blasted nose smashed in because of Philippa Casemore. He should have demanded some sort of recompense from the girl. But it just seemed he somehow lost his head when she looked at him, when her big green eyes, so sincere and so troubled, had landed on him. He'd admitted to being St. Austell at that moment to the bolt of a skittish mare, and then where would he be? Arguably in a much better spot than he was now, with her thinking of him as his lesser title, and him thinking about her at all. Quite disconcerting that time. Jason should have told her who he was, but he quite enjoyed her discomposure, her concern in searching for him when he was only a hair breadth away from her. That enjoyment quickly evaporated when the truth of the situation settled in his mind. Damn it, all the hell! Why didn't she remember him? He remembered her. He remembered the way her breast pressed softly against his chest and warmed him despite his coat. He remembered the way her brandy-scented breath had tickled the side of his neck as they danced. He remembered how well she fit against him, almost perfectly. It was more than a little lowering to think he had big sort of an impact on her. It was more than a blow to his ego. More than disconcerting. Women remembered him after all. They all did, didn't they? Of course they did. With your own St. Austell, for God's sake. But not Philippa Casemore. She remembered his face or his voice, only his blackened name with the forefront of her mind. Wicked St. Austell, the watcher of the innocent, ruler of reputations, the devil incarnate. Damn it all to hell. He'd never debauched one innocent, not one. But there was something about Philippa Casemore that made him think he might enjoy the experience immensely, if she were the innocent in question anyway. She wouldn't forgive him after that, would she? Lord, please be that's Mr. Austin, £500 that Lord St. Austell fed Lady Philippa Casemore before the end of the season. Jason snorted. How Austin was going to lose £500